Hello, my name is Derek Atkins, and this is Saints and Sinners, where we dive into the Bible to see what God has to say to us in today's world. For the past few episodes, we've been doing a special series called Signs of the Time, in which we've been looking at the signs that Jesus gave his disciples that will precede Jesus's glorious return. Most of the signs that we're looking at are taken from Matthew chapter 24, but many of these signs are also found in Mark 13 and Luke 21. Some of the signs that we've already looked at include false teaching, wars and rumors of wars, as well as famines, earthquakes, and pestilences. Today, we're going to look at another important sign that will precede Jesus's glorious return. In Matthew 24, verses 9 through 11, Jesus says this to his disciples: "Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people." These are not words that any of us want to hear. Yet the reality is that throughout history, many Christians have been persecuted because of their faith in Jesus. In every generation since Jesus' time, Christians have suffered in one way or another because of their faith in Jesus. During the Roman Empire, many Christians were imprisoned or put to death. For example, during the Diocletian persecution, which began in AD 303, Christianity was outlawed, Christian worship was banned, churches were destroyed, Bibles were burned, and Christian clergy who refused to worship pagan gods were arrested. And this happened throughout the entire Roman Empire. Christians were also tortured and martyred. This was the longest and worst of the Roman persecutions against Christianity. The rise and spread of Islam, beginning in the 7th century, brought a new source of persecution to Christians. By AD 732, just 100 years after Muhammad's death, large parts of what were once Christian lands were under Islamic rule, including Iran, Iraq, Syria, North Africa, and Spain. Now, some Muslim leaders treated Christians in a very humane manner, but the sad reality is other Muslim rulers treated Christians much differently. Many Christians suffered and even died during the Protestant Reformation, including Anabaptists, Huguenots, which was the name for French Protestants, and Puritans. Many of these persecuted Christians eventually left for the New World, including the Pilgrims, who founded Plymouth Colony in what eventually became the state of Massachusetts. Later, some 1 million Armenians were killed by Ottoman Turks during World War I in what became known as the Armenian Genocide. And this picture shows Ottoman soldiers who were marching Armenians to an execution site. After the October Revolution of 1917, Christians suffered terribly under communist rule in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, China, North Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Cuba. In fact, The communists in the Soviet Union identified Christians as their mortal enemies and used all manner of means to eradicate Christianity, including the destruction of churches, interrogation and torture, sending believers to imprisonment among the many camps of what Alexander Solzhenitsyn called the Gulag Archipelago, denying believers and their children educational and job opportunities, and even killing Christians, whether they were Catholic, Protestant, Pentecostal, or Orthodox. Even today, the communist governments of North Korea and China are still persecuting Christians severely. North Korea is often named as the single worst nation in terms of its persecution of Christians, while the situation for Christians in China has worsened a great deal over the past 5 years and continues to worsen literally almost day by day. Nor are China and North Korea the only places where Christians experience persecution today. Today, there are many countries throughout the world where Christians are being persecuted, including India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Iran, Eritrea, and Somalia. Currently, more Christians are being killed for their faith in Nigeria than in any other country. According to the International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law, 6,006 Christians were, quote, hacked to death, end quote, between January 2021 and March 2022. Even in the West, which for many centuries was a thoroughly Christian civilization, there is growing hostility towards Christians. As the LGBTQ plus movement has become more and more accepted, many who support LGBTQ plus rights have demonstrated greater hostility towards Christians, whom they often blame for persecuting gays, lesbians, and trans people in the past, and whom they believe support a religious ideology that is hostile towards LGBTQ plus people. LGBTQ plus people, together with many other progressives, such as those who support abortion and so forth, view Christianity together with other religions as an obstacle to the progress of those values they believe are beneficial to society. This growing hostility towards Christians in the West is just one reason, but by no means the only reason, why many people are leaving the Christian faith in the West. During much of the 20th century, there was a marked decline in Christianity in Europe, with dramatic decreases in church attendance as Europe became more and more secular. Much to the amazement of the rest of the world, America remained strongly religious throughout the 20th century, but we are now seeing a similar decline in church attendance and belief in Christianity in the United States and Canada. At this point, we need to ask the question, is the recent decline of Christianity in the West a sign that Jesus will return soon? When we look at the long record of church history, we see that there have been times when Christianity has grown in certain parts of the world and times when it has declined in other parts of the world. According to the International Bulletin of Mission Research, as of this year, that is 2023, there are 2.6 billion Christians in the world. Today, there are 8.1 billion people in the world, so a bit more than 31% of the world's people identify themselves as Christians. So we have this pie chart that illustrates the current percentage of different religions in the world today. And in this pie chart, Christians are listed as 32%. So there may be some disagreement as to whether Christians make up 31% or 32% of the world population. But roughly 1/3 of the world population is Christian. But that means that roughly 2/3 of the world population are still not Christian. Given that Christianity has had its share of advances and retreats over the centuries, one could easily conclude that the current decline of Christianity in the West will likely be balanced out or eclipsed by the continued growth of Christianity in the global South. This could very well be the case, but there is one other factor that I think is radically changing the global religious landscape in our time, and that factor is the internet. Because of the internet, the largely secular and even anti-Christian attitudes of the West, together with progressive emphasis on individual rights, are having a huge impact on the rest of the world, especially on young people in nation after nation. This is one reason, not the only reason, but this is one reason why LGBTQ plus rights have gained tremendous momentum in East Asia and Southeast Asia, which is where I live. This region, East Asia and Southeast Asia, have traditionally been strongly traditional in their worldviews and ethical norms. So we're seeing tremendous change, even in parts of the world that have historically been very traditional in their understandings of human sexuality and family structure. So yes, it is very possible that the decline of Christianity in the West is a sign that Jesus really will come again soon. Nor is this inconsistent with the growth of Christianity in other parts of the world, as we'll see in our next video on signs of the times. In verses 12 and 13 of Matthew 24, Jesus continues by saying, "Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of many will grow cold, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved." Here we see one of the results of people turning away from Christianity, an increase in wickedness. Now, one of the interesting things about this verse is that the Greek word for wickedness literally means lawlessness. Wickedness is certainly a good translation for the word lawlessness, because when we engage in wicked and immoral behavior, we certainly are acting against God's commandments. But this lawlessness and wickedness goes way beyond the realm of individual or personal wickedness and includes much of the lawlessness we're seeing today, where rioting mobs are burning down businesses, vandalizing churches and synagogues, and tearing down statues of men and women who made important and positive contributions to our world, including George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Winston Churchill. Here's my warning to my fellow Christians. In some cases, there are legitimate concerns about past injustices that Christians have committed, such as slavery, anti-Semitism, and racism. But we must be very careful how we respond to the demands made by those who march under the banner of social justice. Many of today's social justice activists subscribe to a worldview that judges people according to their group identification rather than according to the content of their character. And when they do this, they identify some people as being oppressors and other people as being oppressed, regardless of whether individuals within these groups are actually oppressing others or being oppressed today. For example, LGBTQ plus people are always identified as being oppressed, while Christians are always identified as being oppressors, unless Christians make a clear demonstration that they are allies of LGBTQ plus people. It doesn't matter how mean an LGBTQ plus person is, as long as they identify as LGBTQ plus, they are automatically identified as oppressed and are therefore considered one of the good guys. And it doesn't matter how kind many Christians are, if they affirm the Bible's teachings that LGBTQ plus behaviors and identities are wrong, they are automatically identified as oppressors and are therefore considered one of the bad guys. This is why many social justice activists think they are actually making the world a better place when they vilify Christians and call them all manner of wicked names, because they see Christians, and especially Bible-believing Christians, as oppressors and therefore evil. Likewise, many of today's new atheists also believe they're doing what is truly best for the world when they mock the Bible and when they mock Christians. Many new atheists, such as Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and Sam Harris, wrote books in which they argued that Christianity, together with all other religions, is dangerous to the very survival of humanity. Given what they perceive as the existential threat to humanity posed by Christianity, they advocate a very militant form of atheism, including the eradication of all religious belief. As I continue to watch the news, I am of the conviction that Christians around the world will experience increasing persecution. In fact, we could even see the day come when there will be a truly global wave of anti-Christian persecution, which would easily fit in with this sign of Jesus's return. That is the sign of persecution and unbelief. But regardless of how bad persecution becomes, or even if we are fortunate enough to never experience persecution for our faith, we still have Jesus's promise that those who stand firm to the end will be saved. In fact, we find this promise elsewhere in the Bible. Be faithful to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. This is from Revelation 2:10. 2 Timothy 2:12 says, if we endure, we will also reign with him. And in 1 Corinthians 1:8, we read, he will keep you strong to the end, so that you will be blameless on the day of our Lord Jesus Christ. So, no matter what challenges you face, I want to encourage you to remain faithful to Jesus all the days of your life. In the meantime, I want to challenge you to pray for our brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering for Christ. If you live in a country where you have the privilege to petition your government, I encourage you to write to your president, your prime minister, or whatever representative, senator, or member of parliament is responsible for representing the district where you live on behalf of your persecuted brothers and sisters. For example, if you are in America, I urge you to write our elected officials to ask them to place Nigeria on the list of those nations of particular concern when it comes to religious persecution. And I encourage you to give financially to organizations that serve the persecuted, such as the Voice of the Martyrs, Christian Global Relief, and Open Doors. And above all, pray for your persecuted brothers and sisters around the world. Pray that they will remain faithful to Jesus no matter what. Pray that God will meet the needs that they have day to day, need for food, shelter, for provision, for protection. And if God calls them to make the ultimate sacrifice, pray that they will remain faithful to Jesus to the very end. Next time, we'll look at another very important sign that will precede Jesus's glorious return. In the meantime, if you like today's video, please hit the like button. If you want to receive notification of other videos in this series, hit the subscribe button. And if you have any comments or questions, please write them in the section below. Until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus as we await his glorious return.